The Birthday Party by Harold Pinter. The story in brief written by Ohidur. Act 1. Stanley, a lodger in Meg's boarding house. Opens with a brief conversation between Meg and Petey. Meg, a woman in her 60s. Petey, her husband, is of almost the same age. The conversation in the morning of a day in summer is quite inconsequential, in fact, absolutely superfluous. Meg gives Petey his breakfast, asking if their lodger, Stanley, has not yet come downstairs for his breakfast. Stanley Webber, late 30s, has been staying in the boarding house of Petey and Meg for about a year. Meg, in charge, situated in a town close to the sea. Petey works as a deck chair attendant on the sea beach. Meg has become very fond of her lodger, Stanley, and feels very happy when taking a cup of tea to him in his room upstairs or when serving him as breakfast. Also proud of her boarding house, which, she claims, is on the approved list of boarding houses. Meg's behavior towards Stanley is such as to indicate that, while she looks after him with a motherly concern, yet she has a desire to become his mistress or, perhaps, is already his mistress. May thus be regarded as a mother-cum-mistress to Stanley, even though Stanley's manner of talking to her is somewhat brusque. Stanley, an ex-pianist, not working at present. Meg recalls those days when Stanley used to play the piano on the pier to entertain the sea bathers. In those days Stanley was a member of a concert party which held regular concerts on the pier. But now for some time past Stanley has been doing nothing. He is not only out of work now but also hardly ever goes out of doors. Meg urges him to start playing again, but he replies he does not have a piano of his own. Tells her that a very good job has been offered to him as a pianist and soon would be leaving this place and going to join a concert party which is expected to tour all the big cities of Europe. The relationship between Meg and Stanley. There is some inconsequential talk between Meg and Stanley also. He comments unfavorably upon the breakfast which Meg serves, though at the same time acknowledges the fact he would be nowhere without the service Meg renders. Expresses his dissatisfaction not only with the breakfast but with the room he is occupying and with the whole setup of this boarding house. Refers to the whole establishment as a pigsty, the building and closed area where pigs are kept, a dirty or untidy place, and says his room needs sweeping. Meg, getting into an amorous mood, says she has had some lovely afternoons in that room, implying perhaps that she has been carrying on some sort of flirtation there with him. Meg is like a mother to Stanley, but also behaves as if she were at the same time his mistress. Stanley's account of his past experiences as a pianist. Meg now informs him 2 visitors are expected to come to this boarding house. He asks in a state of surprise who the 2 visitors are and why they want to come. Meg explains they had met Petey on the beach on the previous night. Had told him they were looking for some accommodation in this town. Stanley's curiosity about them is aroused. Asks Meg all sorts of questions about them, though Meg is in no position to answer these questions because she knows hardly anything about those men who want to come and stay here. He gives Meg an account of a successful solo musical concert which he had on one occasion given in the London locality of Lower Edmonton. Says his concert had proved to be an enormous success, but that another concert which he had wanted to give on a subsequent occasion proved a complete fiasco. Some people had become hostile to him and had so arranged things that his second concert could not be held. Those people had wanted to humiliate him and to bring him down to his knees. From the account which he gives to Meg, not at all clear why some people had turned against him. Mysteriously the first one was successful but the other unsuccessful, fiasco. It is Meg's wish that he should not leave her and the boarding house but should continue staying here. Stanley, feeling perturbed, Meg, nervous too. Meg's information about the expected arrival of the 2 has mentally perturbed him of what we do not understand. Now he takes revenge upon Meg by giving her a brief account of some people who would be coming on this very day in a van and bringing with them a wheelbarrow in which they would take away a dead body from this place. Meg feels very nervous on hearing his brief account of what, according to his information, will happen in the account of the day. Meg feels nervous because it seems those people might be bringing a wheelbarrow in order to carry her own dead body away from this boarding house. Stanley, not interested in Lulu, a young girl. A next-door neighbor of Meg now comes to see Meg, a young girl named Lulu. She is carrying a parcel. Meg is going out of the house to do a bit of shopping. So she asks Lulu to put the parcel on the sideboard in the living room. When Meg is gone, Lulu enters into a conversation with Stanley. Lulu offers to go with him out of doors in order to have a kind of picnic with him. Evidently, Lulu feels attracted by Stanley and would like to strike up a friendship with him. But Stanley shows no interest in Lulu, whereupon Lulu goes away, saying he is a bit of a washout, a complete failure, an event or sports competition prevented from happening or stopped early because of heavy rain. The arrival of Goldberg and McCann to carry out an assignment. The visitors now arrive at the boarding house. Meg, as we know, has gone out shopping. Stanley, on seeing the two men enter the boarding house and make themselves quite comfortable. They are Goldberg, a Jew in his 50s, and McCann, who addresses Goldberg as Nat, seems his first name. Goldberg compliments McCann on being a very competent man. McCann offers his thanks to Goldberg for his kindness and for the favors Goldberg has in the past done to him. It seems they have come here to accomplish some mission and so sent here by some organization they are serving. McCann is feeling somewhat nervous about the kind of job the both assigned. However, Goldberg tries to soothe McCann's feelings by assuring even though the job to be done may be hazardous. McCann and Goldberg have no reason to fear because their doing the job would not in any way harm them personally. Goldberg's suggestion about a birthday party for Stanley. Meg now returns from her shopping and enters into a conversation with her two guests who ask her all sorts of questions about her present lodger, whose name, she tells them, is Stanley Webber and who has been staying here for a year or so. Meg says it is Stanley's birthday today, whereupon Goldberg suggests that they should all give a party to Stanley on this occasion, promising to make all the necessary arrangements. Meg feels delighted by the idea of the party, and says she would put on her party dress for the occasion. It is agreed that the next-door neighbor, Lulu, should also be invited to the party. Meg's birthday present to Stanley. When the two men have been escorted upstairs to the room assigned to them, Stanley comes back to the house and begins to ask Meg all sorts of questions about who those men are, though she can provide no information. She then tells Stanley it is his birthday today, brought a present for him. Stanley looks surprised on being told it is his birthday. Evidently he himself has not been aware of the fact that it is his birthday. Meg then opens the parcel which Lulu had placed on the sideboard. She takes out a drum from the parcel and tells Stanley this drum is her birthday present. It is a boy's drum, a kind of toy drum. Perhaps Meg has given a drum to Stanley because Stanley has no piano to play upon. Stanley puts the drum round his neck and begins to play on it with the two drumsticks. At first Stanley plays on the drum gently and in slow rhythm. Then he begins to go round the table, playing on the drum in the same regular manner. Suddenly, however, his beating of the drum becomes irregular and loud. Then he begins to bang the drumsticks with great force, without any rhythm or regularity. He is now beating the drum in a savage manner as if he is under the influence of some evil spirit. And here Act 1 ends. Act 2. Stanley, informed by McCann of the proposed birthday party. Evening same day. Scene the same. Living room of Meg's boarding house. McCann is alone when Stanley, who had gone out in order to avoid the two visitors, returns. McCann introduces himself to Stanley, who has all the time been feeling apprehensive about the purpose and the motive of the visit of these two men. McCann tries to speak to Stanley in a friendly manner, but Stanley does not respond to this show of friendliness. McCann informs him that a birthday party has been arranged for him and will take place at night. Stanley does not feel enthusiastic about the proposed birthday party and, in fact, denies that it is his birthday today, saying that his birthday will fall in the next month. Stanley says he is not in the mood for a party, that he would just be going out again. Stanley expresses the view a birthday party is merely an occasion to get drunk. McCann begins to whistle an Irish tune, The Mountains of Mourne, and Stanley joins McCann in whistling it. Stanley then asks who are the guests invited to the birthday party. McCann replies a young lady, Lulu, and McCann's companion, who had come with him to this boarding house, would be among the guests besides McCann himself, and that all the preparations for the party have been made. Stanley's effort to win McCann's goodwill. Stanley then says he had a feeling that he has met McCann before. He had lived all his life in the town of Maidenhead, had been leading a very quiet and peaceful life, very happy at home in that town. Only because of certain business compulsions had come to this place, where detained for a longer period than anticipated. Would again be going back soon to hometown, since no place better than home. When Stanley asks what McCann is doing here, McCann replies his friend are here on a short holiday. Stanley says they have chosen the wrong place for a stay because this house is not a boarding house at all. Meg is not in her right mind. He asks McCann whether his companion had told him anything about the real purpose of their visit to this place. Then unwittingly contradicts himself, says all the years he had lived in the town of Basingstoke. Only a little earlier he had said had lived all his life in the town of Maidenhead. Having judged McCann is an Irishman, Stanley now begins to talk admiringly about Ireland and the Irish people in order to win McCann's goodwill. Stanley says he loves Ireland, admires and trusts the Irish people because they respect the truth and have a sense of humor. Stanley then invites McCann to go with him to the nearby pub and have a glass of beer with him. But just then Goldberg and Petey enter. Goldberg's talk about his younger days. Petey introduces Goldberg to Stanley, and Goldberg expresses his pleasure at having met Stanley. Goldberg then says, while young, he used to go every Friday for a walk with a girl for whom he had a great admiration. After finishing his walk, when he returned home, his mother used to ask him to eat his dinner before it got cold. Mother used to address him as Simey and give him an excellent piece of cooked fish to eat. Petey now says would not be able to join the birthday party in honor of Stanley for going to his club in order to play chess with his friends. Stanley's vain attempt to send the two men away. Petey leaves. Goldberg starts a conversation with Stanley, even though Stanley would not like to have anything to go with either Goldberg or McCann. Stanley, now pretends manager of this boarding house, tells Goldberg, truly speaking, there is no room available in this place. By a sheer mistake, Goldberg and McCann have been given a room by Meg. Stanley says the room occupied had been reserved for somebody else. They should go and look for some other accommodation. Seeing the bottles of liquor McCann has brought under Goldberg's instructions, Stanley says this boarding house does not have a license to serve drinks or to permit drinking. Stanley once again asks the two men to leave this place and to take away their bottles of liquor. Goldberg and McCann are, however, in no mood at all to leave. Stanley says it would not be a good thing for them to start any kind of trouble. Attitude of Goldberg and McCann towards Stanley now becomes somewhat menacing. McCann says would kick Stanley if Stanley remains obdurate. They ask Stanley to sit down. Stanley refuses to comply, and a heated exchange among the interrogation of Stanley, and a touch of violence. Conversation now takes a strange turn. Goldberg and Stanley begin to interrogate Stanley. Interrogation is based on all kinds of charges and accusations Goldberg and McCann bring against Stanley, with Stanley either giving irrelevant answers or giving no answers at all. For instance, Goldberg asks why Stanley is wasting everybody's time and getting in everybody's way. Goldberg asks why Stanley treats Lulu as if she were a leper person with leprosy. a person who is strongly disliked and avoided by other people because of something bad that he or she has done. McCann asks why Stanley had left the organization and betrayed them. Goldberg says Stanley has been playing a dirty game. McCann repeats Stanley had betrayed the organization. Goldberg then asks McCann to take off Stanley's glasses. McCann snatches Stanley's glasses. Stanley has to clutch the chair in order not to stumble and fall down. Goldberg then calls Stanley a fake, asks what Stanley had done to his wife. McCann says Stanley had killed his wife. Goldberg asks why Stanley had killed his wife. Stanley can merely say, "What wife?" Goldberg then asks why Stanley had never got married. McCann says the woman whom Stanley was to marry had waited for him at the church, but Stanley had not turned up for the marriage and had left them in the church. Goldberg asks if Stanley recognizes the existence of an external force in this universe, a force which is responsible for human beings and which suffers for their sake. He next asks Stanley if the number 846 is possible or necessary. He then asks where Stanley's debauchery will lead him. McCann asks him what Stanley has to say about Ireland. Goldberg asks who had watered the wicket in Melbourne in 1955. Goldberg now asks why the chicken crossed the road. McCann asks whether the chicken came first or the egg came first. Questions continue till Stanley, feeling desperate, kicks Goldberg in the stomach. McCann picks up a chair and is about to attack Stanley with it, but is prevented from doing so by Goldberg. Stanley's predicament under the interrogation. Many of the questions asked are not in any way connected with one another. No logic behind these questions. Some contradict each other. Questions are of a mixed and miscellaneous kind of which nobody would be able to make head or tail. Stanley at this point can only utter incoherent grunts, short low sounds instead of speaking, usually because of anger or pain from his throat, so bad is his condition under the questioning by the two men. A toast, proposed to Stanley's health by Meg. At this point Meg appears on the scene. The two men, who had been on the verge of thrashing Stanley, pretend as if nothing unusual was happening. Goldberg pays a compliment to Meg on the pretty dress which she has put on for the birthday party. Bottles of whiskey are now opened. Liquor is served to everyone. McCann drinks only Irish whiskey, opens a bottle for himself. Goldberg suggests Meg should propose a toast to Stanley's health on the occasion of Stanley's birthday. Meg makes a brief but sentimental speech saying nothing in the world she would not do for Stanley, the only Stanley she knows better than anybody else in the world. Meg feels overwhelmed by her sentiment of affection for Stanley, begins to sob. Goldberg says she has made a beautiful speech. A speech by Goldberg. Just then Lulu, invited to the birthday bath, arrives to attend the party late. Goldberg introduces everybody, asks to be ready to drink to Stanley's health. Now Goldberg makes a speech, says he feels highly gratified to learn, from Meg's speech, that there is still a lot of true affection left in this world. He says he is really surprised by the genuineness of the sentiments which the lady of the house has expressed for Stanley. Goldberg says Stanley is the man who is the object of so much affection. Goldberg says Meg has extended the sum total of her devotion to a member of her own living race. Goldberg then offers his heavy congratulations to Stanley on his birthday. Stanley felicitated Goldberg's reminiscence. At the end of Goldberg's speech everybody drinks to Stanley's health. Lulu says Goldberg has made a wonderful speech. Meg kisses Stanley and says, "Many happy returns of the day, Stan." Others too wish Stanley a happy birthday. Lulu tells Goldberg he is a marvelous speaker. He tells her his first chance to deliver a speech came at the Ethical Hall, Bayswater, a London locality. Had spoken on that occasion on the necessary and the possible. Goldberg says his first speech had produced a terrific effect. Goldberg then asks Lulu to come and sit on his lap, and she readily complies. Everybody is now drinking whiskey. Meg does not even mind mixing Scotch whiskey with McCann's Irish whiskey. Goldberg, who is once again in a reminiscent mood, speaks of how he used to go out for a walk through the park and used to say hello to the little boys and little girls on the way. Returning from his walk, his wife, who, like his mother, used to address him as Simey, would shout to him to take his dinner before it got cold. She used to give him an excellent dinner. But his wife had died and the funeral had been a splendid affair. Everybody in a reminiscent mood. Under the influence of drink, Meg also gets into the reminiscent mood. She tells McCann her father had wanted to take her to Ireland but not actually done so. She recalls there used to be a nightlight in her room when she was a little girl. Her room was pink with a pink carpet and pink curtains. Her father was a very big doctor. Meg now asks McCann to give her a little more whiskey. McCann fills her glass, at the same time singing a line from an Irish song. Meg says McCann has a lovely voice, whereupon Goldberg asks McCann to sing a song. Lulu wants a love song but McCann sings a patriotic song about the beauty of Ireland. The song shows McCann is homesick and would like to go back to his country. Lulu has all this time been encouraging Goldberg to flirt with her. She has said to him, "I've always liked older men, they can soothe you." She also now says Goldberg closely resembles the first man with whom she had ever fallen in love. Lulu also gets into the reminiscent mood, asks Goldberg if he had known her when she was a little girl. Blind man's buff. Stanley, prevented from strangling Meg. Meg now suggests they should play a game. Decided they should play blind man's buff. At first Meg is blindfolded and has touched McCann. McCann's turn to be blindfolded. McCann touches Stanley. Now Stanley's turn to be blindfolded. McCann removes Stanley's glasses before blindfolding him. All this time Goldberg has been fondling Lulu. Now Stanley, blindfolded, begins to move about in order to touch someone. As he walks through the room, his foot is caught in the drum which had been given to Stanley by Meg as a birthday present but which McCann had now put on the floor in Stanley's path. Stanley keeps moving, with the drum clinging to his foot, happens to move towards Meg. He then lays his hands upon Meg, begins to strangle her. Goldberg and McCann rush forward and push Stanley away from Meg. Stanley's attempted raping Lulu. Suddenly the electric lights go out, a blackout in the room. McCann lights his torch, but his torch falls down from his hands, and the room is again plunged into darkness. Stanley moves Lulu in the darkness. Lulu screams and faints. Everybody is now in a state of confusion mingled with terror. After a little while McCann is able to find his torch. When McCann shines the torch, Lulu is seen lying spread-eagled on the table, with Stanley bending over her. As soon as the light of the torch falls upon Stanley, he begins to giggle. Goldberg and McCann move towards him, but he moves away from them. At last Stanley stands with his back against the wall, while Goldberg and McCann advance towards him threateningly. It appears Stanley had tried to rape Lulu in the darkness. Goldberg and McCann now pounce upon Stanley, as it were. End of Act 2. Act 3. Stanley, subjected to inhuman treatment. How Goldberg and McCann deal with Stanley after seizing him is not depicted on the stage nor described to us. But from what happens subsequently we can imagine two men have dealt with Stanley in a most brutal and inhuman manner. Petey, absent at the birthday party, had returned from the club late in the night and formed some vague idea Stanley was being subjected to some kind of torture. Next morning Petey is reading his newspaper as usual, while Meg, who is having a headache on account of her drinking heavily on the previous night, tells her husband she has no cornflakes and no bread in the house, can therefore serve no breakfast to him or to Stanley. Meg finds the drum gift lying broken, saddening her. But Petey tells her she can always buy another. Meg says she would be going out ever soon in order to buy something for breakfast. A big black car. Meg opens the door for going out, stops suddenly and turns to Petey. She asks him where that big black car parked outside has come from. Petey informs her this car belongs to Goldberg. Meg asks Petey if a wheelbarrow in the car. This question surprises Petey. Says no reason why Goldberg should have a wheelbarrow in his car. Meg feels greatly relieved to learn that. Meg is about to go out when Goldberg comes down from upstairs. Goldberg says Meg makes a very nice cup of tea. Meg asks if Stanley is coming downstairs also. Goldberg replies, on a lovely sunny day like this, Stanley would certainly come downstairs. Meg asks if Goldberg is going for a ride in his car. Goldberg gives no reply to this question but says a good old car which has never let him down. Stanley suffering from a nervous breakdown, according to Goldberg. Meg has gone out shopping. Goldberg tells Petey Meg is a charming woman. His own mother and his wife were equally charming. Petey asks how Stanley is feeling this morning. Goldberg replies only a qualified doctor can tell exactly how Stanley is feeling. Petey says Stanley's condition last night was pitiable. Goldberg says birthday celebration had proved too much for Stanley. Stanley was having a nervous breakdown. Petey asks if Stanley would get all right. Goldberg replies possibly Stanley might already have recovered. Petey says if by lunchtime Stanley does not recover, he will go and get hold of a doctor. Goldberg tells Petey not to bother about a doctor because everything has been taken care of. Not clear what Goldberg exactly means by this. McCann, feeling uneasy. McCann too now comes downstairs, is in a nervous state, tells Goldberg he would not go up to Stanley in his room anymore. However, McCann also says Stanley is now quiet and is no longer talking. Goldberg asks if Stanley would soon be ready to leave. McCann replies Goldberg should himself go upstairs and find out. Also says he has given Stanley's broken glasses back to Stanley. McCann had deliberately broken Stanley's glasses in the course of the game, blind man's butt part of a finished cigarette that has not been smoked. Petey now goes into the garden in order to take a look at his peas. Goldberg, feeling shaken. Goldberg, like McCann, is also feeling nervous about something. He tells McCann very unusual for him to have such a feeling of uneasiness. All his life long he has maintained very good health. McCann happens to address Goldberg as Simey. Goldberg feels enraged and says, "Never call me the dot." Evidently, Goldberg does not want that the name by which his mother and his wife used to call him should be used by anybody else. Goldberg then tells McCann all his life he has been following certain principles and that he is a self-made man who has never infringed any of the rules of the game of life. His father at his deathbed had given him some very sound advice. One item: one should never forget one's family because the family is the rock, the constitution, and the core. But it is evident Goldberg, though he is trying to talk in a tone of self-confidence, is really feeling shaken by the events of the last night. In fact, it seems he himself is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. At one point he cannot even complete a sentence because his thinking falters and he does know what to say. "Because I believe that the world ... comma," he says, but is unable to complete the sentence and feels lost. He feels completely deprived of his strength and vitality, and asks McCann to blow into his mouth to enable him to breathe properly. Soon, however, Goldberg recovers enough of his strength to be able to talk coherently again. Lulu, seduced by Goldberg during the night. Lulu now appears, complains Goldberg had taken undue advantage of her last night and seduced her. Goldberg pokes fun at Lulu, and speaks in a sarcastic manner to her. McCann joins Goldberg in ridiculing Lulu. Lulu beats a hasty retreat, and goes away before the two men do any further harm to her. Stanley's nervous breakdown, and a second session of brainwashing. Stanley now comes downstairs, is completely changed appearance, well-dressed, clean-shaven, holds his broken spectacles in his hand. But his smart appearance is deceptive because he seems to have suffered a considerable damage to his mind. Goldberg asks him how he is feeling. Stanley stares blankly at the floor. Goldberg and McCann then subject Stanley to another, whelm him with a heavy shower of statements, making all kinds of promises and giving him all kinds of assurances to ensure a golden future for him. However, Stanley does not show any reaction to these promises and inducements. In fact, he is in no position to react because most probably he does not understand much of what they are saying. Stanley's mental faculty seems at this time to be paralyzed, and he can only produce gurgling sounds from his throat. Stanley, taken away by Goldberg and McCann. Petey, who had gone out for a few minutes, now comes back, is surprised to see the two men trying to take Stanley away with them. When asked by Petey where they are taking Stanley, Goldberg replies taking him to Monty because Stanley needs special treatment. Petey says will himself bring a doctor for Stanley if necessary. But Goldberg insists Stanley needs special treatment and Monty is the best available specialist. When Petey persists Stanley should be allowed to stay where he is. Petey now realizes his helplessness. However, Petey tries to speak encouragingly to Stanley, saying, "Stan, don't let them tell you what to do." Goldberg and McCann then leave, taking Stanley with them, while Petey can only stare at the departing figures. Meg, not informed by Petey of Stanley's departure. A few moments later, the sound of a car starting is heard. Two men have departed, taking Stanley with them. Petey picks up the newspaper, begins to read it, when Meg returns from her shopping. Meg asks if the two men have gone away and whether they will come back for lunch. Meg does not have the least notion they have taken away Stanley too with them. She asks Petey where Stanley is, and whether Stanley is still in bed. Petey does not want to give his wife a shock by telling her the truth. He replies Stanley is still asleep. Meg says Stanley would get late for his breakfast. But Petey says, let him sleep. Meg's claim, the belle of the ball. Meg, who is in her usual cheerful mood, tells Petey the party last night was a lovely one. He should have been there to participate in the singing, dancing, and the games which were played. She then says everybody at the party had agreed she was the belle of the ball, meaning that she was the most admired woman at the dance. She is, of course, merely flattering herself in making this claim because, though Goldberg had paid some compliments to her, nobody had expressed any opinion about her being the belle of the ball, and, in any case, there had been no dancing except a little by Meg herself. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.